Hello everyone. Today I am just going to discuss about the poem My Mother at 66 written by the poet Kamala Das, which is included in your English syllabus, especially in class 12, both in CBSE and Assam higher secondary syllabus. So you should know about this poem. I will just give you a brief introduction about the poet Kamala Das. First, before starting this poem, My Mother at 66. So now we should know that who was Kamala Das. So Kamala Das was a very famous Indian poet who was born in 1934 and died in 2009. And especially she was born in the state Kerala and in a place called Purnakureyalam she was born, and she was very much famous with her pen name known as Madhavi Kutti, and she was born with her name as Kamala Suraya. So later she converted her name to Kamala Das after her marriage to a young man called Madhav Das. So she also had written very famous poems like an introduction. An introduction is her autobiographical poem because in this poem she had expressed and exposed all about her personal life without any hesitation. So you should read this poem, an introduction, which is a very critical poem and a very controversial poem also. And along with this, she had also written different collection of poems, which you will find in your graduation level if you take English as your major subject. So now I want to discuss about this poem, My Mother at 66, which is a very famous poem in which the poet shares her own experience in this particular poem, because here she brings out a contradiction in human relationships. So throughout this poem the poet has pictured what emotions a daughter feels when she bids farewell to her own mother, because the poet feels sad for her mother and is not able to express her grief. So this poem is a very short poem, and in this poem you will find the main theme is aging. The main theme of this poem is aging, which is the law of nature. It also depicts the helplessness and aspirations of the young generations. It portrays the different stages of life and how everybody grows old and faces various situations that life throws at them. And in this poem you will find the central theme as aging. Aging is only the central theme of this poem. And just I want to give you a brief explanation of this poem, that My Mother at 66 is a poem where you will find the relationship between a mother and a daughter, because in this poem there is an explanation about one fine day where the poet was driving to Cochin airport from her parents' house. And on the way, it means that on the way when she was arriving to the airport, her mother also accompanied her, because in that particular car where the poet was traveling, her mother was also sitting beside her. She also mentions that her mother's age is 66. And while the old lady was dozing, her mouth remained open, because she at that time it means her mother felt sleepy at that time. So her face also was faded and pale. And what happened at that time, Kamala Das has noticed her mother's image, which was looked like a corpse. The summary of this poem, My Mother at 66, depicts completely the dilemma of a child seeing her mother getting older, and the lifeless and pale face of the mother pained at the poet's heart. Because the poet was deeply pained by seeing her mother's pale face. In this poem, the poet's mother seemed to have been lost in her own world. And in this poem, you will find that the poet then turned away her attention towards the window and looked at the nature that was fully of activity, activity and life. Here she shows the contrast between the world outside and the inside gloominess which prevail inside their car. And in this poem, you will find that how the poet tells us that the daughter reaches the airport and waits far away from her mother, and as she bids goodbye to her mother, the image of her old pale face strikes her. She compares how one grows old and starts looking like the faded moon in the winter. So in this poem, the poet further states that the daughter feels on getting separated from her mother. Here the fog is an obstacle for the moonlight. So the poet also suddenly feels sad about getting separated from her mother as she felt in her childhood, because here now the poet would arrive to another place, and so her mother is just coming with her to drop her at the airport, and now she had to bid goodbye to her mother, and she at that time felt very much separated and frustrated because she was just she felt that she was just getting separated from her mother as she felt in her childhood, and she hopes to see her mother again. She expects her mother to enjoy her life and not to cry in front of her. So, in this poem, you will find the particular day also where the poet mentions as Friday. And on that particular Friday, the poet was driving back to the airport from her parents' house. And at that time, she was with her mother, and her mother fell asleep in the car. And while her mother was unconsciously sleeping, the poet realizes that her mother is growing old and feels sad about it. So she compares her mother with a corpse. Then she looks outside and sees the young children playing, and she also notices the trees are sprinting outside. She then realizes that everything grows old after a certain time, and this realization scared her. And she then continues to show that in the airport she was at the security check and stood far away from her mother. Then she notices that her mother's aging face, which looked very much pale and dull. So at that time, what happened? The poet feels sad about being separated from her mother, just as she felt in her childhood. She feels that it may be the last time she is seeing her mother, as her mother has grown old. She still says that she will see her mother soon, as she does not want to lose her. So in this way, the poem My Mother at 66 ends with this beautiful conclusion. So this is about the whole poem My Mother at 66.